Stop throwing fish scraps in the trash and then wondering why your tomatoes stall out in mid-season. I see this constantly. Gardeners buy beautiful seedlings, amend the top few inches with compost, maybe sprinkle some granular fertilizer, and then they complain when fruit set is weak and growth slows by July. Meanwhile, they're discarding one of the most complete soil inputs available for free. The real consequence isn't just wasted scraps. It's shallow fertility that never builds long-term soil strength. If you care about growing serious food and not just decent-looking plants, subscribe to the Husbandry channel. We test this stuff in real beds, real containers, and controlled systems. No trends, just results. Here's what most people misunderstand about fish scraps. Fish scraps are not just nitrogen. They are protein, fat, calcium-rich bone, phosphorus, trace minerals, and amino acids locked in a slow-release biological package. When you bury them correctly, you're not fertilizing in the conventional sense. You're feeding the soil food web. Bacteria and fungi break down the proteins gradually, and nutrients are released in sync with plant demand instead of all at once. But depth and placement are everything, and this is where people mess it up. The burial trick that actually works is deeper than most gardeners are comfortable digging. In a standard raised bed that's at least 12 to 16 inches deep, I bury fish scraps 10 to 12 inches below the surface, directly under where heavy feeding crops will grow. For tomatoes, peppers, squash and brassicas, I dig a hole roughly 14 inches deep, lay in about 200 to 300 grams of chopped fish scraps. Cover it with at least 3 inches of native soil, and then transplant above that layer. That soil buffer matters. You see, fresh fish decomposing will temporarily spike microbial activity and, well, consume oxygen. If roots hit raw scraps too early, you can actually stress young plants. But with that 3-inch soil barrier, decomposition starts below the root ball and gradually feeds upward into the active root zone. In my own backyard beds, I ran side-by-side comparisons over 2 full growing seasons. One bed received a standard organic granular fertilizer at transplant and again at fruit set. The other bed got a one-time fish scrap burial under each tomato plant. By mid-season, the fish-fed plants had noticeably thicker stems and darker foliage. Yields were roughly 15 to 25% higher by weight, and more importantly, the plants held production longer into late season without a second feeding. This isn't magic, it's controlled decomposition. Now let's talk about soil conditions, because honestly, fish burial in compacted waterlogged soil is a mistake. If your bed holds water after heavy rain or irrigation, you'll want to fix that first. Fish scraps decompose best in well-drained, biologically active soil. In heavy clay, I reduce the amount to closer to 150 grams per planting hole and mix in coarse compost above the fish to introduce oxygen and microbes. In sandy soil, I actually increase organic matter around the burial zone because, sand drains fast and nutrients can move too quickly. The goal is steady mineralization, not leaching. This is also where monitoring becomes practical, not obsessive. I use the Yamron 4-in-1 soil moisture meter to check moisture and temperature in the weeks after burial, not because I like gadgets, but because guessing is unreliable. You insert the probe about 4 inches into the soil, wait roughly 10 seconds, and read moisture percentage, temperature, pH, and light intensity on the backlit LCD. I check at least 5 spots in a bed and average the readings, especially for moisture and pH. When moisture consistently reads above 80% in heavy soil, decomposition can turn anaerobic. That's when smell and poor breakdown happen. When soil temperature stays between about 18 and 30 degrees Celsius, microbial activity is strong and fish scraps break down cleanly. Below that, especially in early spring, decomposition slows. timing matters. The meter uses 4 8AA batteries and weighs about 120 grams, so it's light enough to move bed to bed. The 45-degree rotating head makes it easier to read without bending awkwardly over raised beds. It's not perfect, and like most soil meters, pH readings can vary slightly, but for moisture and temperature it's been reliable enough for practical garden management. If you want to check it out, the link is in the description. Now let's deal with smell and pests, because that's the first objection. If you can smell fish after burial, you did it wrong. 10 to 12 inches deep in active soil, there should be no odor after backfilling. I garden in a suburban area with cats, rodents and birds around, and I've had zero digging issues when burial depth is correct and soil is tamped firmly. In high-pressure wildlife areas, you can lay hardware cloth a few inches below the surface for the first 3 to 4 weeks while decomposition stabilizes. Another mistake is overloading a small container. In a 20-litre container, I'll bury maybe 75 to 100 grams of finely chopped fish scraps off-center and at least 8 inches deep before transplanting peppers or dwarf tomatoes. In a 5-litre pot, I don't use fish at all. There simply isn't enough soil volume to buffer decomposition. For raised beds that are 4 by 8 feet, I typically use 1 burial per heavy-feeding plant, spaced 18 to 24 inches apart. That means maybe 6 to 8 fish placements per bed, not a continuous trench of fish. More is not better. Controlled strategic placement works best. Now, hydroponics is different, and this is where people get reckless. You do not bury fish scraps in hydro systems. That will destroy your reservoir. In organic hydroponic setups, I've experimented with filtered fish hydrolysate at dilution rates around 1 to 2 milliliters per liter in heavily aerated systems. Oxygenation is critical. Without strong aeration, you'll suffocate roots quickly. Living soil handles raw decomposition. Hydroponics requires processed inputs and constant oxygen. The biggest long-term benefit of burying fish scraps is mineral cycling. Fish bones break down slowly, releasing calcium and phosphorus over time. In tomato beds where I consistently use fish burial and maintain even moisture, I've seen a reduction in blossom end rot compared to beds that rely only on fast-acting fertilizers. It's not a cure-all, but consistent calcium availability combined with stable watering absolutely helps. And that brings us back to moisture management. Uneven watering will sabotage even the best fertility strategy. I check soil moisture before irrigating instead of relying on surface dryness. Surface soil can look dry while the root zone is still moist. Overwatering slows decomposition and weakens roots. Timing is another factor people ignore. I bury fish scraps at transplant, or at least 4 weeks before heavy fruiting demand. If you bury scraps mid-season during peak fruit load, you won't see the full benefit until later growth cycles. This is a foundational input, not an emergency correction. There's also a philosophical shift here. When you bury fish scraps, you're building a nutrient reservoir beneath the plant. You're investing in soil structure and microbial diversity. You're reducing dependency on repeated fertilizer applications. Over 2 to 3 seasons, beds treated this way develop deeper root systems and better resilience to heat stress. That's the growth explosion people talk about. It's not overnight. It's sustained vigor, thicker stems, stronger leaf color, and heavier fruit clusters that don't taper off early. If you're serious about growing nutrient-dense food and building soil that improves every season instead of resetting each year, stop discarding fish scraps. Use them strategically, monitor your soil conditions, and respect the biology underground. Subscribe to the Husbandry channel if you want more field-tested strategies like this. Share this video with another grower who's tired of shallow feeding and inconsistent harvests. Better harvests start below the surface, and practical soil knowledge will always outperform packaged solutions.